The lecture hall smelled like burnt copper and regret. Professor Krell's 3 eyes blinked in sequence as he tapped his data slate against the podium, calling the advanced xenobiology class to attention. 64 students from 12 different species settled into their seats, mandibles clicking, tentacles coiling, and various breathing apparatuses hissing in anticipation. "Today," Krell announced, his voice resonating through the translator embedded in every student's auditory system, "we discuss the termination protocols for species classification Terran-human. Pay attention. This may save your carapace someday." In the back row, a human named Marcus Webb sat perfectly still, his worn leather jacket creaking slightly as he adjusted his position. Nobody had noticed him slip in 20 minutes before class started. Nobody ever did. Humans had that talent. Krell activated the holographic display. A 3-dimensional rendering of a human male rotated slowly, anatomical details highlighted in pulsing amber light. "The human specimen," Krell continued, "mass, approximately 80 kilograms, height 1.75 meters, appears deceptively fragile. This is your first mistake." A Throxian student in the 3rd row, all 8 feet of crystallized exoskeleton and overconfidence, raised one serrated appendage. "Professor, surely their lack of natural armor makes them vulnerable to standard plasma discharge. An excellent way to anger one before it kills you, Candidate Vox." Krell zoomed in on the human's skeletal structure. "Note the dense calcium composite framework, capable of withstanding significant impact trauma. Their bones break, yes, but observe. The hologram showed a fractured femur. Within 6 to 8 standard weeks, the bone regenerates stronger than before. They literally weaponize injury." Nervous chittering rippled through the class. Marcus suppressed a smile. This was getting interesting. "Now," Krell continued, warming to his subject, "optimal termination strategy. Target the central processing unit." He highlighted the human brain. "A projectile weapon, energy beam, or kinetic strike to this region will cease function immediately. Simple, efficient, foolproof." Marcus bit his tongue. Oh, this was too good. A Quellan student, resembling a floating jellyfish made of starlight and bad decisions, pulsed an inquiry. "What about their cardiovascular pump? I've read that cessation of blood flow results in death within minutes." "Correct," Krell seemed pleased. "The human heart, located here." The hologram's chest cavity lit up. "Puncture this organ, and the human has approximately 4 to 6 minutes before consciousness fades, followed by death. However," he paused dramatically, "humans have been documented surviving up to 15 minutes with catastrophic heart damage if sufficiently motivated. Their endocrine system floods the body with chemical compounds they call adrenaline and cortisol, effectively overriding system shutdown protocols." "That is terrifying," whispered a Melvari student, its fur bristling across all 4 of its bodies. "It gets worse," Krell said, and Marcus could swear the professor was enjoying this. "Humans possess something called a fight-or-flight response, but galactic studies show they frequently choose a 3rd option." "What 3rd option?" Vox demanded. "Fight harder." The room fell silent except for the environmental systems humming through the ventilation shafts. Krell pulled up combat footage. Grainy, clearly recorded during the Epsilon Frontier conflicts. A human soldier, designation Emma Voss according to the subtitle, took 3 plasma rounds to the torso. She should have dropped. Instead, she pivoted, returned fire with a chemical propellant weapon the humans called a rifle, eliminated 4 hostiles, dragged 2 wounded squad members to cover, applied medical intervention to both, and then, only then, allowed herself to collapse. She survived, Krell added. 14 reconstructive surgeries later, she returned to active duty. That's not possible, Fox protested. No species can function with that level of system damage. Humans, Krell said slowly, do not care what you think is possible. Marcus leaned back in his chair. The professor had done his homework, he'd give him that. But there were gaps, significant ones. Krell advanced to the next slide. Tactical considerations. Humans are tool users, but unlike most species, they exhibit extreme creativity in weapon application. Anything can become a weapon in human hands. Furniture, eating utensils. On one occasion, a human killed an attacker using a rolled-up magazine and determination. A Quellan student flickered nervously. How do we defend against such unpredictability? Superior numbers, overwhelming force, and never, under any circumstances, engage a human in close-quarters combat. Krell's voice dropped to something approaching fear. They have a martial discipline called hand-to-hand combat with hundreds of variations. Krav Maga, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, Sistema, each designed for maximum damage with minimum energy expenditure. Marcus mentally added about 40 other styles Krell had missed. Savat, Silat, Kali, the list went on. But surely, Vox insisted, our technological superiority provides adequate protection? Krell made a gesture that translated as laughter mixed with despair. Let me tell you about the Battle of Kepler Station. 40 human soldiers, armed with primitive chemical propellant weapons, held off a force of 800 Krindor shock troops for 72 hours. The Krindor had plasma cannons, powered armor, orbital support. The humans had bullets and spite. When reinforcements finally arrived, all 40 humans were still combat effective. The Krindor had retreated. Silence. How? Someone whispered. The humans had something the Krindor didn't. They called it motivation. Apparently the station contained a civilian population including children. Humans become irrational when children are threatened. Krell pulled up another file. There are 14 documented cases of individual humans fighting off multiple armed attackers while sustaining lethal wounds, simply because their offspring were in danger. In one case, a human female with 70% blood loss and a punctured lung eliminated 3 armed intruders before finally succumbing. Her child survived. The class sat in stunned silence. Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his chest. Yeah, that tracked. He'd seen similar things during his service. Humans didn't have natural weapons or armor, so they'd developed something arguably more dangerous. They'd weaponized love. Krell continued. Environmental vulnerabilities. Humans require oxygen, obviously. Deprive them of atmosphere, they die in minutes. They also require specific temperature ranges. Too hot or too cold, their biological functions cease. Marcus almost laughed. Almost. The professor clearly hadn't heard about the Yakutsk colonists who'd survived 3 months in -40 degrees when their heating system failed. Or the Death Valley exploratory team that had mapped terrain in 60-degree heat with minimal equipment. Toxins, Krell said. Human biochemistry is vulnerable to many compounds we find harmless. Heavy metals, certain alkaloids, radiation beyond specific thresholds. If direct confrontation is unavoidable, chemical warfare is recommended. A Quilvan student raised a question. What about psychological warfare? Surely their mental processing is susceptible to manipulation. An excellent question with a terrible answer. Krell's eyes all focused on different points in the room. Human psychology is simultaneously their greatest weakness and most formidable strength. They experience emotions intensely. Fear, anger, joy, sorrow. These can be exploited, yes. But, he paused, humans possess something they call resilience. They adapt to trauma. They form what they call coping mechanisms, break a human psychologically, and they often rebuild themselves into something harder to break the second time. Marcus thought about his therapist, Dr. Aisha Payne, veteran counselor, who'd helped dozens of soldiers process combat trauma. Yeah, humans were good at that, turning scars into armor. Let me be clear, Krell said, his tone shifting to something urgent. If you encounter a human in the field, your best option is avoidance. Failing that, overwhelming force applied from maximum range. Never assume a human is defeated until you have confirmed cessation of all biological functions. They have been known to feign death and then counterattack. Fox scoffed. This seems like excessive caution, Professor. They're just bipedal mammals with delusions of adequacy. Krell's 3 eyes all fixed on the Throxian student. Candidate Vox, the humans have a saying. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. Do you know what a dog is? Some kind of Terran fauna? A predatory pack animal humans domesticated 12,000 years ago. They took wolves, apex predators, and turned them into companions. They did this through patience, selective breeding, and sheer stubborn determination. That's what humans do. They take the dangerous things in the universe and make them useful. Or friends. sometimes both. The lecture continued for another 20 minutes. Krell discussed human reaction times, surprisingly fast despite their biological limitations. He covered their vision, binocular and depth perceptive, evolved for persistence hunting. He mentioned their hands, opposable thumbs allowing tool manipulation. Other species required specialized appendages to achieve. Finally, mercifully, the lecture wound down. In conclusion, Krell said, humans are classified as a Class 4 threat, not because they are physically superior, but because they are strategically unpredictable, tactically creative, and psychologically resistant to deterrence. Treat every encounter as potentially lethal. Are there any final questions? Marcus Webb stood up. The movement was casual, unhurried, but every species-specific sensor in the room immediately fixed on him. Predator recognition, the universal constant. Yeah, Marcus said, his voice carrying easily across the lecture hall. I've got a few corrections. Professor Krell's three eyes widened. Who? How did you get in here? This is a restricted xenobiology course. Marcus walked down the aisle, hands visible and empty. Security was pretty lax. Figured you wouldn't mind an expert opinion. He reached the podium and leaned against it. So, that was a pretty good primer, Professor. B+ work. But you missed some important details. The class sat frozen. Vox's exoskeleton had gone pale, which Marcus didn't even know was possible. First correction, Marcus said, holding up one finger. You mentioned targeting the brain for instant termination. True, mostly. But humans have this fun thing called redundancy. I've personally seen a guy take a round that should have scrambled his cerebellum, and he still managed to complete his objective before collapsing. Don't ask me how. Even our doctors couldn't explain it. He held up a second finger. The heart thing. Also true, with caveats. You mentioned 4 to 6 minutes. Under calm conditions, sure. Under combat conditions? I watched a medic work for 18 minutes with what was basically catastrophic cardiac failure. She saved 3 lives before her own gave out. And before you ask, no, that shouldn't be biologically possible. She did it anyway. Krell had backed away from the podium. This is highly irregular. Third, Marcus continued, warming to his subject, you talked about environmental vulnerabilities, oxygen deprivation, temperature extremes, toxins, all accurate. But here's what you missed. Humans are adaptation specialists. Put us in a low-oxygen environment, and given time, our bodies literally grow more red blood cells to compensate. Expose us to toxins, and we develop antibodies. We've colonized worlds with ambient radiation that would sterilize most species. Why? Because we're too stubborn to die. A nervous trill came from somewhere in the middle rows. Fourth, and this is important, Marcus's expression hardened. You said never engage a human in close combat. That's good advice. But you know what's even better advice? Don't threaten what they love. Because that's when all your threat assessments and termination protocols become irrelevant. A human protecting something they care about doesn't calculate odds. They don't consider survival probabilities. They just act. The room had gone absolutely silent. Even the environmental systems seemed to be holding their breath. Marcus straightened up. But here's the thing, Professor. Here's what you really should have taught this class. He looked around the room, making eye contact with as many students as possible. Don't kill humans, because we're not your enemy unless you make us your enemy. We're loud, we're aggressive, we're annoyingly persistent, sure, but we're also loyal. We're team players. We'll die for strangers if we think it's the right thing to do. That's not a weakness to exploit. That's a potential ally you really don't want to waste. He pushed off from the podium and headed toward the door. Oh, and one more thing. He paused at the threshold. Your security really needs work. I've been sitting in this class for 40 minutes, and nobody noticed until I wanted to be noticed. Might want to fix that. Then Marcus Webb walked out, leaving behind a lecture hall full of aliens who were suddenly intensely grateful they'd attended that particular class. Professor Krell slowly returned to the podium. His 3 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep confusion among his people. Class dismissed, he said quietly. And someone please update the human threat classification. I think we had it wrong. In the hallway, Marcus checked his comm device. A message from Captain Torres. Did you really just crash a xenobiology lecture to terrify alien students? Marcus typed back. Somebody had to correct the record. They were getting sloppy. You're impossible. Yeah, Marcus muttered to himself, grinning. That's kind of our thing. Marcus made it 3 corridors away before the footsteps started following him. Not human footsteps. Too many legs, wrong rhythm. He didn't turn around, just kept walking at the same casual pace, while his peripheral vision tracked the reflection in a polished wall panel. Vhox, the overconfident Throxian student who'd been so sure humans were easy prey. Perfect. Marcus rounded a corner into a less-traveled maintenance corridor and stopped, turning to face his follower. Vox skidded to a halt, all 8 feet of crystallized exoskeleton clicking against the floor plating. You, Fox said, his translator rendering the tone as aggressive curiosity mixed with something that might have been fear. You humiliated Professor Krell. Nah, Marcus said, leaning against the wall. I educated him. There's a difference. Fox's serrated appendages flexed, a threat display Marcus recognized from his xenobiology briefings. Funny how those briefings never mentioned that Throxians only did that display when they were nervous. You think you are impressive, Fox said. One human, making threats to an entire lecture hall. Wasn't making threats, was stating facts. Marcus crossed his arms. But I'm curious. You followed me out here for a reason. Want to test the professor's theories? See if you can actually kill a human? Fox's exoskeleton paled again. No. I want to know if what you said is true. Which part? The part about humans not being enemies. Unless we make you enemies. Vox shifted his weight. A gesture that translated as uncertainty. My homeworld, Throx Prime, we are preparing defense protocols. The Galactic Council says humans are expanding too quickly, taking too many worlds. There is talk of preemptive action. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Preemptive action. That's a fancy way of saying, start a war before the other guy does. Yes. And you're asking me if that's a smart move? I am asking, Fox said carefully, if what Professor Krell taught us is accurate, if humans are truly that dangerous. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. This wasn't some academic exercise anymore. This was a kid, basically, trying to figure out if his world was about to make a catastrophic mistake. Okay, Marcus said. Let me tell you a story. True story. Happened about 15 years ago. There was a colony world called New Bristol. Small population, maybe 50,000 humans. Mining operation, families, normal colony stuff. A species called the Vraken decided New Bristol was on a strategic route they wanted. So they showed up with warships and gave the humans 48 hours to evacuate. Did they evacuate? Hell no. They told the Vraken that New Bristol was their home and they weren't leaving. Marcus pushed off the wall. The Vraken thought this was stubbornness. They thought humans were bluffing. So they started bombing the colony. Fox made a sound like rocks grinding together. They killed civilians? They tried. Here's the thing about New Bristol. It was a mining colony, which meant they had industrial equipment, heavy machinery, explosives for excavation, and about 300 former military personnel who'd retired there. Marcus smiled, but there was no humor in it. Those 300 people, with mining equipment and improvised weapons, held off a Vraken battle fleet for 11 days. Long enough for a human naval task force to arrive. What happened to the Vraken? They surrendered. Smart move, honestly, because by the time the Navy showed up, the colonists had captured 2 Vraken landing ships and were planning a counterattack. Marcus met Fox's eyes. Do you know what the human fleet commander said when the Vraken asked for mercy? Vox shook his head. She said, "You attacked our children. You're lucky I'm bound by military law. Because if it were up to me, I'd let the colonists have you." Then she took the Vraken commanders into custody and made them personally apologize to every family whose home had been damaged. That is, Vox searched for words. That is not what I expected. Yeah, well, humans are complicated. We'll fight you to the death if you threaten us. But we also have laws, rules of engagement. We try really hard not to be monsters, even when being a monster would be easier. Marcus gestured back toward the lecture hall. That's what Krell got wrong. He taught you how humans die. He should have taught you how humans think. How do humans think? We think everyone deserves a chance. We think cooperation is better than conflict. But we also think, if you hurt something we love, you've forfeited your right to mercy. Marcus softened his tone. Look, Fox, I don't know the politics between your world and the Galactic Council, but I can tell you this. If Throx Prime comes at humanity with preemptive action, you will lose. Not because we're better fighters, though we are. Not because we're more advanced, because we're not. You'll lose because humans don't quit. Ever. We'll take losses that would break any other species and keep coming. Not because we're brave. Because we're too stupid to understand when we're beaten. Fox was silent for a long moment. You are trying to scare me. No, Marcus said. I'm trying to save your life. And maybe millions of others. Because if shooting starts between Throx Prime and humanity, it won't stop until one side is gone. And I promise you, it won't be humanity. That sounds like a threat. It's a warning. There's a difference. Marcus checked his comm device. I've got a shuttle to catch. But Vox, do me a favor. When you get home, tell your leaders what you learned today. Tell them humans would rather be friends than enemies. But if they force us to choose, we'll choose survival. Every single time. Marcus started walking away, then stopped. Oh, and one more thing. That display you did with your appendages? The threat posture? You only do that when you're nervous. Might want to work on that if you're going into diplomacy. He left Vox standing in the corridor, processing information that would probably keep him up for several sleep cycles. 3 hours later, Marcus was on a transport shuttle heading back to the human diplomatic station when his comm device chimed. Priority message from Admiral Janet Okoye, commander of the Third Fleet. He opened it, already knowing this wasn't going to be a social call. Webb, the Admiral's recorded message said, her dark eyes serious. I heard about your little stunt at the Xenobiology Academy. Normally I'd have you disciplined for unauthorized contact with potential hostiles. But I'm also hearing that Professor Krell has requested a formal meeting with our diplomatic corps to discuss revised threat assessments and possible cooperation protocols. So either you got incredibly lucky, or you actually knew what you were doing. Marcus grinned. Probably both, but he wasn't going to say that. The Admiral continued, I need you to attend that meeting. You've apparently become the unofficial human spokesperson on why aliens shouldn't try to kill us. Congratulations on your new job. Report to Diplomatic Station, 7 in 48 hours. And Webb, try not to start any wars. The message ended. Marcus leaned back in his seat, watching the stars stream past the viewport. 48 hours later, Marcus found himself in a conference room that smelled like filtered air and tension. Professor Krell sat across from him, all three, eyes focused with uncomfortable intensity. Beside Krell sat Ambassador Thin, a Quellan whose natural bioluminescence kept flickering with what Marcus had learned to recognize as anxiety. Captain Torres sat next to Marcus, her expression carefully neutral. Admiral Okoye attended via hologram, her presence filling one corner of the room like a particularly intimidating ghost. Let us begin, Ambassador Thin said, his voice modulated through the translator to sound calm and diplomatic. Professor Krell has presented disturbing information about human combat capabilities and psychological profiles. The Galactic Council is concerned about humanity's expansion into contested sectors. Contested by whom? Torres asked. Because from where I'm sitting, every world humanity has colonized was either uninhabited or we negotiated settlement rights through proper channels. The concern, Thin said carefully, is not where humans are now. It is where humans might go. Your species has a documented history of aggressive expansion. On our own planet, Marcus interjected. Yeah, we had wars. We did terrible things to each other for thousands of years. Then we figured out that cooperation worked better than conflict. Took us way too long, cost millions of lives, but we learned. That's what you're not getting. Humans learn. Krell spoke up, his translator giving his words a weight they might not have had in his native language. After your intervention in my class, I conducted additional research. I found 73 documented cases of humans negotiating peace with species they were actively fighting. 73 times your people chose diplomacy over destruction when victory was within reach. Because winning a war doesn't mean much if everyone's dead, Torres said. We learned that lesson the hard way. This is precisely what concerns us, Thin said. A species that knows how to wage total war but chooses not to. What happens when you stop choosing? Restraint? Marcus laughed, a short bark of sound that made everyone in the room flinch. You're worried about us because we have self-control? That's like being scared of someone because they know how to use a knife but prefer to cut vegetables. You should be more worried about species who don't know their own strength. Or, Admiral Okoye said, her hologram leaning forward, you should stop looking at humanity as a threat and start seeing us as potential allies. Because here's the reality, Ambassador. The galaxy is a dangerous place. There are species out there that make humans look like pacifists. The Krindor Expanse, the Drevok Collectorate. Threats that don't negotiate, don't compromise, don't care about your laws or ethics. We are aware of these threats, Thin said. Then you should be aware that when the Krindor attacked Waystation Epsilon, it was human reinforcements that held the line until Galactic Council forces could arrive. When the Drevok raided shipping lanes in the outer territories, human patrol ships provided convoy protection for 36 species, including some that had never even met humans before. Okaya's expression hardened. We don't help people because we want something in return. We help because it's the right thing to do. That's how humans work. Krell's 3 eyes blinked in sequence. I am beginning to understand my lecture was fundamentally flawed. You think? Marcus said. You taught aliens how to kill us. You should have taught them how to talk to us, how to work with us. Because yeah, humans are dangerous, but we're a lot more dangerous to our enemies than our friends. And right now, you're trying to figure out which category you fall into. Is that another threat? Thin asked. No, Torres said firmly. It's an observation. Look, we get it. Humanity showed up in the galactic community making noise, taking up space, being generally annoying with our music and our art and our weird food preferences. We're the new kids, and we're not acting like we're supposed to. But that doesn't make us your enemy, unless you make us your enemy. Marcus stood up, drawing all eyes in the room. Here's my proposal. Professor Krell, you want to teach aliens about humans? Fine. But I'm going to sit in on your classes. I'm going to correct you when you get it wrong. And I'm going to make sure your students understand that humans aren't monsters or machines. We're just people trying to make a life in a universe that's way bigger and scarier than any of us want to admit. You want to teach xenobiology? Krell asked, incredulous. I want to teach understanding. Big difference. Marcus looked at Ambassador Thin. And you, sir? You want to know what humans will do if pushed? We'll survive. That's what we do. But we'd much rather thrive alongside you than survive in spite of you. Your choice, which one happens? The room fell silent. Marcus could hear the environmental systems, the subtle hum of the holographic projector, the sound of his own heartbeat. Finally, Ambassador Thin's bioluminescence stabilized into a pattern Marcus didn't recognize. I will take your words back to the Galactic Council. I cannot promise they will be well received. I'm not asking for promises, Marcus said. I'm asking for a chance. Give us that, and I guarantee humanity will surprise you. Probably annoy you too, but mostly surprise you. A sound emerged from Thin that the translator rendered as laughter. You are very strange, Marcus Webb. Yeah, well, I'm human. It's kind of our thing. The meeting concluded with what diplomats called productive dialogue and what Marcus called nobody started shooting. So I guess that's a win. As everyone filed out, Professor Krell approached Marcus. I have a question, Krell said. During the lecture, I stated that humans possess fight or flight responses, but often choose to fight harder. You did not correct this. That's because you got it right, Marcus said. But why? What evolutionary advantage does such behavior provide? Marcus considered the question. You know what the most dangerous predator on Earth was? Not humans, not even close. There were bigger things, faster things, things with claws and fangs that could tear us apart. But humans survived because we had something those predators didn't. We had each other. When things got bad, we didn't run away and save ourselves. We fought together. We protected the weak. We carried the injured. We chose the group over the individual, again and again, for hundreds of thousands of years. That's not evolution, Professor. That's culture. And it's way more powerful. Krell's 3 eyes all focused on Marcus with what might have been respect. I believe I have much to learn. We all do, Marcus said. That's the fun part. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the same lecture hall where he'd crashed Professor Krell's class. But this time, he was at the podium. Krell sat in the front row, taking notes. "Okay," Marcus said to the assembled students, representing 20 different species. "Welcome to Humans 101, also known as Please Stop Trying to Kill Us. Let's be friends instead. I'm Marcus Webb, and yes, I am actually human, and no, I won't demonstrate any combat techniques because the last time I did that, someone broke 3 support structures and the maintenance crew is still mad at me." Nervous laughter rippled through the room. Good. Laughter meant they were listening. "Here's what you need to know about humans. We're loud. We're emotional. We form attachments to literally anything, including small, furry animals, inanimate objects, and sometimes even rocks if they're shaped interestingly enough. We cry at sad stories and laugh at things that aren't objectively funny. We're messy and complicated, and we argue about everything." He paused, looking out at the sea of alien faces, sensors, and appendages. "But we're also loyal. We're creative. We'll help a stranger for no reason other than it feels right. We'll die for our friends and fight for people we've never met if we think they're being treated unfairly. We make mistakes, lots of them, but we try to learn from them. And if you give us a chance, we'll probably become the most annoying friends you've ever had. Because once humans decide they like you, good luck getting rid of us." More laughter, less nervous this time. "So here's my first lesson. Don't try to kill humans. Not because it's hard, though it is. Not because we'll kill you back, though we might. Don't try to kill us because you'll be missing out on having humans as friends. And trust me, you want that. Because when the universe gets scary, and it will, humans are the ones who'll show up to help, every single time. Not because we're heroes, because we're too stubborn to abandon people who need us." Marcus grinned at the class. "Now, let's talk about why humans love carbohydrates so much. Because that's a whole psychological profile right there." In the back of the room, Captain Torres watched with a smile. Next to her, Admiral Okoye's hologram flickered. "He's actually good at this," Okoye murmured. "Terrifying thought, isn't it?" Torres replied. "Absolutely, but effective." Down at the podium, Marcus was explaining the concept of pizza to a group of aliens who looked simultaneously confused and intrigued. Somewhere in the galaxy, the Galactic Council was reviewing humanity's application for full membership status. The debate would continue for months. But in a small lecture hall on a minor educational station, a human was teaching aliens not to fear his species. And maybe, just maybe, that would make all the difference. Because that's what humans did. They showed up. They talked too much. They made friends in the weirdest places. And they never, ever gave up on the idea that things could get better. Marcus Webb finished his lecture to applause, which sounded like 17 different types of biological and mechanical noise happening simultaneously. It was beautiful. "Same time next week," he announced. "We'll cover human music, and I promise at least 3 of you will find it emotionally devastating. Bring tissues if your species uses them." As the students filed out, chattering in dozens of languages, Marcus caught Professor Krell's eye. The professor's 3 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture Marcus had learned meant approval. "Not bad for a dangerous predator species," Krell said. "Thanks," Marcus replied. "We try." Outside the lecture hall, the station's artificial sun was setting, painting the corridors in shades of amber and gold. Somewhere out there, humans were building homes on new worlds, making friends with strange aliens, arguing about sports, falling in love, raising children, and generally being the loud, messy, impossible species they'd always been. And the galaxy, slowly but surely, was learning that maybe that wasn't such a bad thing after all. Marcus headed to the commissary for terrible station coffee and probably another argument with the Melvari barista about the proper definition of a latte. Behind him, the lecture hall stood empty, waiting for the next class, the next lesson, the next opportunity to bridge the gap between species who didn't understand each other. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And humans were very, very good at starting things. They were even better at finishing them.